Every soul carries a secret. Every choice casts a shadow. Tonight, one such story will unfold. If you're ready to hear it, welcome to Echoes of Fate. There are two kinds of bruises. Those that bloom quietly under long sleeves, and those that never fade because they live in a person's head. She wears both. Her name is Mira. In supermarkets, people compliment her scarf. At work, they say she's so put together. In mirrors, she studies the edges of purple and yellow and tells herself a fresh story each time. A kitchen cupboard door, a trip on the stairs, a stubborn dog leash, a clumsy night. She tells those stories because they are easier to remember than the truth, and because the truth comes with teeth. On a Tuesday night, after the rain rinses the city and the streetlights lift halos off the pavement, Mira sits alone at the table, phone face down, dinner gone cold. Her husband, Daniel, texted at 4:13 p.m, airport, work trip, back Sunday, love you, no kiss emoji, no question mark, no chance for argument. She exhales without realizing she'd been holding her breath. At 9:02 p.m, the phone rings from a number she doesn't recognize. She almost doesn't answer. After a few rings, she answers anyway.
Mrs. Hart,
Yes.
we have your husband.
Her thoughts do not rush to the worst, not right away. They go to practical things first. Which airport? Which gate? She hears herself ask, "What is this?"
He's not where you think. He is alive. For now, we require a transfer. 200,000. 48 hours.
A pause. A tiny sound on the line, like someone has covered the microphone and whispered to someone else.
If you call the police, he dies.
Mira stares at the black screen. 200,000. She doesn't have that. Daniel might. Daniel has everything locked behind passwords and promises and a smile that never reaches his eyes. She tells herself the only thing she is sure of. This is a mistake. They'll call back and say they dialed the wrong person. She'll laugh. She'll forget. The phone rings again. She answers on the first vibration.
Mira?
It's him.
Baby, don't argue. Just do what they say.
The quiet that follows is not peaceful. It's the quiet you get inside a locked room. Here is what you need to know about Mira. She always keeps a go bag in the back of the closet. Not because she plans to run, but because planning lets her believe she could. It has a passport, an old phone, a handful of cash, 2 photographs so small and worn. They look like secrets. She looks at the closet now and doesn't move. She thinks about choices. On paper, this is simple. Pay, and he lives. Don't pay, and he dies. But paper smooths out the wrinkles that real life refuses to. When people ask how she met Daniel, she says it was at a fundraiser, or she says a friend introduced them, depending on how tired she is. The real story is a little messier. She was 23, living in a flat with damp walls and big ideas. He was older, articulate, safe in the way a locked door promises safety. He bought her a coat that first winter. He had answers. He held her hand with certainty. He was never a monster, all at once. He arrived in inches. The first time he hurt her, he cried. The second time, he brought flowers. The third time, he told her if she had just listened. You know the rest of that sentence. At 10:11 p.m., another message arrives. A link. No text. She hesitates, taps. The video opens to darkness, then jolts into focus. A concrete room, A single swinging bulb. Daniel on a chair, wrists bound behind him, a split lip, eyes enormous. A gloved hand lifts his chin. He says her name like an apology and a threat at the same time. The video ends. Mira closes her eyes and waits for the wave to hit. It doesn't. Not the way she expects. What arrives instead is shameful and private. A thin thread of relief. The house is quiet. The door hinges don't hold their breath when they hear his footsteps. The air is hers. She sits in that thought like a person inches from heat in winter. Then the guilt comes, heavy enough to tilt the room. This is the tightrope. She does not want him to suffer. She does not want him back. Both can be true. Both can choke you. 200,000. 48 hours. She writes it on the back of an envelope, like it means something to see it in ink. Below, she draws 2 columns. Pay and don't pay. She waits for one side to fill itself. The pen hovers over the paper, but her hand won't move. Instead, she moves through the house, into his office, no longer a room, but a museum of order. Pens aligned, books squared to the edge. A gunmetal safe, tucked behind leather-bound legal volumes. She kneels and rests her cheek against the cool steel. Daniel taught her some things without meaning to. A birthday, an anniversary, his first car, his mother's maiden name. She arranges them in her head, like tumblers in a lock. The dial whispers. On the 4th try, the safe size open. Inside, files, a hard drive, a velvet box with cufflinks shaped like knives, envelopes of cash, neat as a deck of cards, and a phone. Not his phone. A phone you buy with cash and throw away when it's done. She presses the power button. The screen wakes. No passcode. Messages, names she doesn't recognize, amounts, transfer confirmations, a contact saved only as an initial, R. Her thumb hovers. She opens the thread, R. Confirming shipment received. Client satisfied. D. Ahead of schedule. Same terms next month. R. Understood. Separate channel for the other matter. D. Yes. Don't text this number again. The other matter. She scrolls. Finds a photo. An offshore statement. Balances that make her stomach cold. Another message, older, from an unsaved number. Albion crew asking about you. We warned you. Lie low. And then a week ago, make it look real. She'll pay if she believes it. Mira stares at those words until they blur. Make it look real. The silence inside the house changes shape. It's not proof. It could be old. It could be for someone else. It could be 100 things. The human brain is a loyal thing. It will twist itself into knots for the people it has loved. But the thread is there now, tugging. Was this a performance? An insurance job? A way to turn her into a wallet with a heart? She places the burner phone back exactly as she found it, like touching a sleeping animal. Then she takes the hard drive and slides it into the pocket of her cardigan without thinking why. At 12:07 a.m., the number calls again.
Mrs. Hart, progress?
I need proof he's alive. His picture with today's newspaper.
We sent you proof.
He could be.
She doesn't finish. She thinks of the message. Make it look real.
If you want the money, I need the proof.
Tomorrow, 10 a.m., we'll send a location for a test. No police.
I'm not calling the police.
Truth, for now. She doesn't sleep. She tries to, and her body refuses. At 3 a.m., she stands at the kitchen window and watches the dark bleed out of the sky. At 4:30, she pulls the go bag down and empties it across the table. The old phone, the cash, the photographs. In one, she is laughing into the camera. In the other, she is not. The two faces could be sisters. She makes coffee she won't drink and writes 3 more lists she won't keep. She considers calling her friend Maya. She even types, "Can you talk?" and then deletes it. Because how do you summarize a life like this over a phone line? How do you explain to someone that love can be a cage that looks like a house? At 9:55 a.m., her phone chimes. A pin drops onto a map. The docks, north side. A warehouse with broken windows, a rusted mouth opening toward the water. Of course, Mira drives, not fast, not slow. She counts breaths between traffic lights, a small superstition she invented the winter she almost left. At the warehouse, she parks where she can see the exit. She keeps the engine warm. She waits. At 10:04, the burner phone in her pocket trembles. She answers.
Walk to the south corner, by the green container.
She goes. The air smells like salt and old iron. Her shoes sound too loud. Behind the container, a roll-up door stares back. It rattles, rises, stops halfway. Inside, darkness. A camera eye, red, then a chair, and in the chair, she squints. She doesn't allow herself to hope it's a mannequin. It isn't. Daniel, awake, breathing, a day older than last night. He lowers his head like he can already smell her perfume. A gloved hand holds up a newspaper. Today's date glows like a wound.
Satisfied?
What do you want from me here?
To know we're serious. Noon tomorrow. You will receive instructions.
The line goes dead. The door rattles down. The dark swallows itself. On her drive home, every car looks like a tail. Every face is a lens. She checks her mirrors. She checks her pulse. At a red light, she realizes she is not on the road she meant to take. Her hands have turned the wheel on their own. They have brought her to a building with polished glass and a receptionist with kind eyes. Her bank? 200,000. She does not have it, but maybe he does. Maybe there is a joint account he never mentioned. An investment they were both meant to benefit from. Maybe, in case of emergency, is a phrase with a loophole. She sits with a banker who has the decency to speak gently. He asks for identification, and she gives it. He taps, scrolls, considers.
I see a trust set up by Mr. Hart. You're a beneficiary.
How accessible is that?
There are conditions.
He reads from a screen, then looks up.
One is that all withdrawals trigger a notification to Mr. Hart.
Of course it is.
And if he can't be reached?
Then the notification goes to his designated alternate contact. It lists an R, no full name.
Mira thanks him and leaves before she stands up too fast, and time goes grainy. The initial from the burner. The alternate contact. The shadow behind his shadow. She sits in her car and watches her reflection. The bruise on her collarbone, pale and old, looks like a fingerprint pressed into clay. When she gets home, the house is holding its breath again. The safe yawns open where she left it, and for the first time, she feels the shape of another option. Pay, don't pay, or... She lays the burner phone, the envelopes of cash, and the hard drive on the table. She plugs the drive into her old laptop, the one Daniel said was too slow for today's world. The one he never bothered to touch. Folders open like doors, contracts, names, a spreadsheet that sees more than any confession ever could. Transfers, dates, a column labeled retainer, protection, Another column labeled Persuasion. She is not naive anymore. You don't pay people to protect you unless you live in a world where earning enemies is part of your job description. A sound at the door spins her like a compass, not a knock, a slide. She waits. Then, under the door, a piece of paper crawls in like a timid animal. She picks it up. 5 words in block letters. No police. You have 24 hours. The world shrinks to days and hours and choices. She opens her messages to write to Maya, to write to anyone, to shout into some digital void. She types, "I need help," and deletes it again. She does call someone, but not Maya, not the police. A number she pulled off the last page of the spreadsheet. A name tied indirectly to R-different town, different kind of business. If this is a performance, someone else is in the theater. If it isn't, someone else still is.
You must be lost.
I think we have a problem in common.
Do we?
Daniel Hart.
Go on.
She doesn't. She hangs up. She needed to know the voice existed. It does. Somewhere between fear and courage is a thin country called Enough. Mira has arrived at its border. That night, she packs a second bag. Not the go bag, a bag for a person who plans to stand in a place and not shake. Inside, the envelopes of cash. A cheap tracker she bought with a name that wasn't hers. The old phone, charged. A note she hasn't written yet. She turns out all the lights and lets the house become a shape in a darker shape. She sits at the table and listens to the refrigerator hum like a quiet animal. She is so tired she might float. At 2:08 a.m., a text arrives. Tomorrow, noon. Location to follow. She places the phone face down and closes her eyes. She dreams about water rising in a room with no windows. The location pings at 11:07. A car park by the river. Too public for violence, too open for comfort. Cameras watch everything and see nothing. She leaves early. She chooses a space facing the river and the exit. She can do both. Hold 2 things at once. Watch for danger and imagine the sound of a body dropping into water with a small, neat sound. She tells herself she is not thinking about that. She is. At 12:01, a van slides into view. White, nondescript by design, it stops 3 spaces away. The window rolls down halfway. A hand emerges, gloved. It makes a small, ordinary gesture. Wait. Her phone rings. The number is new.
Walk to the bin, leave the bag, return to your car. Do not look at us.
A pause that feels like a finger tracing her spine.
If you do everything correctly, your husband will come home.
Mira lifts the bag. It looks heavier than it is. Inside, the cash spread in smaller stacks, and beneath it, something she added quietly. The tracker, affixed under the inner seam with tape. The note folded twice. She steps out of the car. The air is a cold mouth. She walks like she isn't rehearsing every motion. She places the bag inside the bin, a domestic object now turned altar. She returns to the driver's seat. She closes the door. She keeps her hands on the wheel. The van doesn't move for 5 long breaths. When it does, it glides. A man steps out, face obscured by a cap, walks to the bin, retrieves the bag, returns. Van door slides shut. The van pulls away like it has nowhere to be. Now, she watches the app on her old phone bloom with a dot that is the bag that isn't quite. The dot begins to move, north. She follows at a distance that reads as coincidence. She has practiced this in her head for years, minus all the parts she could not fathom. She is very calm. Inside, a metronome is beating a hole in the air. The dot leads her past the river's bend, through an industrial part of town that looks like it was built for a movie set and then abandoned by the crew. It stops at a building with a mural of a bird on the side, a bird with its wings cut flat by windows. The van disappears through a roller door. The door sighs shut. Mira parks 2 streets over. The dot stays. She waits. She texts the number from last night, the one that laughed at her when she said Daniel's name. If you ever wanted leverage, now is your chance. No reply. The dot doesn't move. Her hands start to tremble finally, not from fear, from the strain of not being allowed to. She leaves the engine on. She thinks about walking up to the door and knocking like a salesperson. She thinks about calling the police and placing the phone on the passenger seat like a truce. She thinks about driving away and never looking back, changing her name to something quiet and learning the names of birds. On the passenger seat, the second note waits in its envelope, the one she placed in the bag. It says, "If this is staged, you already know I'm not paying you again. If it's not staged, then you are not the only ones watching. Either way, things end today." She did not sign it. She isn't sure who you is anymore. Another text arrives, an unknown number, again. A photo, grainy, Daniel, same chair, same room. A headline behind him that proves only time, not place. And a countdown, 00:59:58. An hour, a deadline to something unnamed. Her phone rings. She answers. No one speaks. She listens to the breath on the line and understands. This is not a test. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is the end of a rehearsal that has lasted years. There is a third choice Mira hasn't written down. It doesn't fit in columns. It is the choice to stop playing by rules handed to her by men who memorize combinations and call it love. She opens the car door. The air is colder now, or she is. She walks toward the building with the bird. She stops 10 steps short. She sees it. A camera blister above the door. A small red dot. She thinks of the video. She thinks of the spreadsheet. She thinks of the note in the bag, and the tracker, and the dot on her screen, and the woman in the photograph laughing at a joke no one can hear anymore. Her phone lights up in her hand. 2 messages stack. First, from the unknown number attached to the van. Turn around, go home, wait. Second, from the number she called last night. Leave now if you want him to live. Or come in if you want him to talk. A fork, not in a road, in a life. Mira imagines what waits behind the door. Scenario 1. The men who took him. The demand for more, because paying once teaches everyone a language. Daniel returned to her, eyes like accusations, the house snapping back around them like a trap. Scenario 2. The performance cutting to its punchline. Daniel standing, unbound. R in the shadows, a nod, a shrug, a bill presented. Make it look real. A lesson delivered. Pay attention next time. Scenario 3. None of the above. Another truth she hasn't let herself think. That Daniel's enemies are not her enemies, and that some debts cannot be bargained with. She stands there, a coin held on the edge of a thumbnail, not flipping it, just feeling the weight. Maya will text later, "You okay?" And Mira will answer, "Busy day," and mean it in a way she has never meant anything. She can walk away. She can walk in. She can call the police from a block away and let the city storm in with paperwork and sirens. She looks at the door. She looks at the river, a moving thing that does not care about her decision. The timer on her phone ticks into the 50s. If you were Mira, if your bruises had learned your name, if your breath tasted like someone else's rules, what would you do? Would you pay and buy back the life you survived? Would you step into the dark and ask for a different truth? Would you watch the river until the timer runs out and let the story end itself? She takes one step. Tell me in the comments what you think she chooses and why. The story is told, but beware, fate waits for none. Until next time, listen closely. The echoes are never far.